It's a right back to where we started the episode. It's just Eddie and I for this edition. Unfortunately, a post-loss edition. They've becoming a bit of a habit. Well, certainly in the last couple of years. It is now 7 losses on the trot for the West Tigers. And as we'll talk about shortly, all of those losses we have conceded 28 points or more. It was a 34 points to 18 loss to the Knights in Newcastle this afternoon. Eddie, I think I'm going to break from tradition. I'm going to throw straight to you, say hello, and ask you for your one word, please, before we get into all of these one-word submissions from the West Tigers podcast forum. Good evening.
Good evening, Joel. Yes, just you and me tonight. It was a tough watch. I just went with joyless, Joel. I think you mentioned it a couple of times in the chat, and it's become a bit of a joyless existence just watching the West Tigers these days, and you could refer to the last 7 weeks or the last year or the last 3 years or the last 13 years. But, I've just been reading through the forums, and even, a couple of my good mates who are rusted on fans like me who, probably watched every game over the last 20 years, they're sort of not watching games. And I got to be honest, and I'll ask you the question, would you be watching today's game if you didn't have to do a podcast tonight? I probably would, because I'm a sucker. Yeah. And I still do care, obviously, but people are just they're beaten down. They're over it, Joel.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm struggling for motivation. I enjoy doing the pod. I enjoy talking to you guys, and we do sometimes have a bit of a laugh or try and see the lighter side of things, because you've got to. I mean, this team will just drive you crazy. And joyless is exactly the word. There is very, very little to smile about. And this game really, to me, has taken some more energy out of taken some more wind out of my sails. And it appears on the socials that I'm not the only one. There's also, it seems to be a big shift. And we'll talk about that. Things are starting to change a little bit in the West Tigers supporters' minds around the coaching situation as well. I think we've sort of turned a bit of a corner there as well. So let's revert back to that if that's okay. We'll run through these. Gary, he's watching the Olympics tonight. So I think Gary, look, there's a litmus test. If Gary doesn't want to come on and talk about the West Tigers, and he'd rather watch a bronze medal.
Very rare.
A bronze medal, I think it's basketball game. That tells you where the West Tigers fans are at the moment. But
what is watching the only thing worse than the West Tigers, Joel, was that breakdancing for Australia. He's watching the breakdancing, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Gary's word is NFL. So Gary is excited about the NFL. I know you're an NFL fan, Eddie. Is that far off? Is that about to start, is it?
They just started their preseason game, so I do love it, and it's about 3 weeks away. But I wonder if that L could have been replaced with an I, Joel.
It could have been. Nick, his one word is actually 2 words, Big Bash. So along the same lines, Nick is, I would presume with that, looking forward to the cricket. Robbie, via the West Tigers podcast website, so not via the forum, he sent us a note in through the website. His word was ego, and that word is in regards to Dewey and his positional play in defence. So reading between the lines, believing that Adam Dewey has an ego that's outstripping his ability, certainly in defence. From the West Tigers podcast forum, JH98, his word was cursed. Mercy Rule, 1 word, incompetent, but then came back with 2 words. Yet again, incompetent, yet again. I like it. Matt V. Tiger, sack Benji, saying we play a dated brand of football. Tiger Town SFS, the word was boring, same old thing over and over again. Tiger Town SFS saying, Eddie, I've seen that game, I've seen the West Tigers play like that 50 times in the last few years. It's just the same old thing and it doesn't seem to change. Tigersman, gap. I really like this. So the word gap is used in a couple of different contexts here. There's the gap between us and everybody else. We also struggle to put a player through a gap. And Tigersman says, I need to stay away from the gap for fear of jumping off it.
That's the word of the week, Joel. It's one already.
The gap. I remember back in the World Sevens days where the Tigers were set to lose to the USA in one of the World Sevens games, and one of the commentators said, quick grab Junior before he drives out into the eastern suburbs. Like, if you lose to the USA, like that's about as bad as it gets. Mac Tiger, ad-lib, no gameplay, just making it up. Or no game plan, I should say, we're just making it up. Rach 09, slow. We're slow in attack, slow in defence, and slow between the years. Amen. NatMax78 September, can't come soon enough. Mike's word was abysmal, both in defence and attack, saying the halves didn't straighten enough, and Clemmer and Stefano were again ineffective. Logan R21, burnt, overcooked, dirty Reds, conditioning, with the least fit team in the comp. I'm sending out an SOS to Avo. Where are you, Avo? We need your one-word submissions. I always like it. But I think I will channel you and I'll fill in your one word, even though you didn't give it to us, and that is wise. You were probably wise not to watch that. Snake's word was purge. We need to purge the coaching staff, and that's about it for the West Tigers podcast forum one-word submissions. A lot of good ones there. I've got a few here. Ironically, a lot of them are numbers. I've disjointed because the way we play the game is disjointed. There doesn't seem to be any harmony, gameplay, fluidity. Unhappy, and what I mean by that, it is I don't think I've seen a team that looks so unhappy, if that makes sense. Like they don't seem to. The NRL is a game. I know it's a professional game, but it's still a game. There should be some degree of modicum of enjoyment. But do they look like a team? And I know it's hard when you're losing every week, but even when we're not playing for anything, they just don't seem to have any joy. They don't seem to be a team that has any lightheartedness, or they don't get any fun out of it.
Well, yeah, it's hard to disagree. It's difficult to judge, obviously, Joel, when a 7-game losing streak, and I think there was a 9-game losing streak earlier this year. But you sort of look at some of those senior guys, and Appy. I mean, he was always known as sort of the happy-go-lucky sort of player throughout his career. I know he's at successful sides for the large part, but even by about round 7, I thought it was all written all over his face. He looked mentally cooked, and he's never going to admit that. But I think it's a symptom, among a lot of our senior players. You look at, obviously there's been a lot of frustration this year, and sometimes frustration turns to apathy. And I don't want to come on and slate sort of players individually, because I think, what's the point? They're out there trying. They're in a struggling club. They're up against it most weeks. They haven't run out favourites once this year. But, yeah, I go back to the word I use. It looks pretty joyless at the moment. And that issue around the coaching staff, I think it's something worth discussing.
Well, let's circle back around to that in a couple of moments' time. I'll go through these, just the last couple of quick points that I've got here. Smoke. I've got smoke as my one word. I'll make that my official one word, because that's the smoke that is going to be pouring out of the sides of the shredder when it finally does fire up.
I wish I could find the shredder, Joel. I wish I could get my hands on it. I'd drive it straight down to McDonald Jones Stadium in a heartbeat. But
it's got to be working overtime, the shredder, soon, hopefully. 3 games. We have 3 games to go, so that's good news. It still also sounds like climbing Mount Everest, doesn't it, when you think about it?
The funny thing, Joel, the quirkiness with the draw, like we've actually got a bye before our last game. So imagine your mindset after that second last game, and then all of a sudden you've got 2 weeks off. Surely you'd be faking an injury and booking your holiday to Bali. I don't want to sound cynical, but really, how are they going to turn up for that last game if they don't win another game in the last 2 weeks, which would mean the wooden spoon is nailed on?
It was also our last away game for 2024, which is interesting. It tells me that the season is starting to get to the end. Thank heavens for that. I can't wait for that. And normally I dread the off-season, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've flipped the last few years. I mean, I was happy we had the bye in round 1, Joel, because I was so, burnt from last year. But yeah, it's tough times at the moment, and a lot of Tigers fans. I just worry, Joel. I don't want to get off track because we could talk all night for this, but about the club's future. Like, how many kids do you reckon aged? Because I was actually sitting in front of a kid today. He was probably 4 or 5, and he's with his dad, and he's still probably at that age where that's probably dad's team, and he throws on a jersey, and it doesn't. It's not the end of the world, but. How many kids between the age of 5 and 18 do you think support the West Tigers? Like, are we becoming almost like a Newtown or a North Sydney Bears, but we're still in the NRL? Like, in terms of our fan base, I wonder if the average age is sort of over 35 or over 40, because Gen Z these days, kids, they all want to be winners. Like, I'm a school teacher, and they all support Man City, and Man City is the the English soccer team that was taken over by one of the sheiks 10 years ago and went from a Division 2 side to winning everything. They had no history, nothing really, in terms of winning. But I worry for the club's future because wooden spoons are bad enough, but where do you think the next generations of fans are going to be?
Well, let me ask you this question, Eddie. Do you know anybody that's a West Tigers fan? I mean, I know one person, and you know this person as well, but how many people do you know are West Tigers fans that didn't come from Wests or Balmain? How many have we picked up through the years? No, I don't think a huge amount. Declan obviously comes to mind, Declan being a little bit younger and coming from overseas, of course. But I don't know anybody else. I don't have any other family members. I don't have any my daughters don't care. I don't know anybody else who's younger than me that came along as a West Tigers fan after the merger. So
it's an interesting point. I've never thought of it that way, but now you throw it to me like that. I can't think of one off the top of my head that, obviously, Declan was born after the merger and he would have no association with Balmain or West. But, yeah, anyone who's had an association with Balmain or West would be, my age at least, sort of 39, 40. And, yeah, I just look out there and think, this issue is probably not, while we're still getting reasonable crowds at Leichhardt and stuff these days, but I'm sure it's bubbling beneath the surface, the average age of the fan base.
Well, I think you and Steve has spoken about this before, that danger of losing a generation of Tigers fans. It is a real worry. I think that we could probably safely say, even though the Warriors have been pretty woeful at different times, the Titans have been, pretty awful at different times. They went, I think, about a year without winning a game, and the Knights, of course, really struggled. I think we're the worst team, certainly of the last 15 years. So, if you look at where Penrith was, remember they came from they were struggling. They were having troubles, and then it all sort of came together. But they were never this low. So it's a real concern. I mean, the other question to ask is, when you decided to become a Tigers fan, Eddie, it was because most likely we were at least a competitive or decent team. Most people don't get on board losing teams. When you're 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, you want to go to the football and you want to win. Don't we all?
Yeah, I mean, well, I was still a school teacher back in 2010-11, and to be fair, back then, Joel, there were 7 or 8-year-olds with Tigers jerseys everywhere because Benji sort of created that, in that first premiership, created a lot of new fans. So whether they're still fans now, I'd like to know because, I've seen, even text we got from Steve today and a few on the forum, people have, who've been rusted on fans back in the day who just not, watching the game is not on the list of their priorities at the moment.
Yeah. Well, there was some good news. The New South Wales Cup won 20-12. We'll take anything we can at the moment. That's like winning a grand final. But what I alluded to before is I feel a bit of a shift. There seems to be increasing concerns about the coaching of Benji Marshall. Now, there's a couple of comments here that I thought I would share. Davey Farrell makes the point that he doesn't believe that we've improved under him, that Benji's basically had this team for 12 months and we're not playing any better or any more consistent or at least not getting any better results than we were a year ago. What do you think, Eddie? I mean, you've got people like Brad Arthur sitting there, you've got Jason Dimitri, you've got some experienced guys that could come in. Is it starting to shift? I feel that the fans are starting to get to the point where they're starting to ask those questions, where the goodwill is starting to wear off.
I agree. I think a lot of the fans have always been a bit quizzical on it and on the fence and wanting to believe, but wanting to see how it worked out. And, yeah, it's just like you look at the metrics, obviously 4 wins is the same as last year, and you could say potentially they've improved from last year because they haven't got flogged as much. But really, like, with all their losses, I think there's, 17 losses now with 3 games to go. I wouldn't say they were unlucky in any of those 17 losses. I don't think any of them have been under 6 points. There might have been a couple by 8 and 10.
Yeah.
But, and then our 4 wins, 2 of them, were by very small margins. The Parramatta game was a point. I think the Titans game we hit the front with 10 minutes to go. So, I don't think we've improved. Where I suppose we have improved is we have unearthed some young players, which we didn't have at the end of 22 or 2023. So, I suppose that's something that's a slight tick to him. But I read a post just tonight, and it was it sort of resonated a little bit, Joel. He compared it, I can't remember the poster's name, but he compared it to the Jason Taylor situation, in that Jason Taylor was the club were thinking about sacking him at the end of 2016, and it was at a critical juncture, which we are at now, really, because we hadn't had 3 wooden spoons back in 2016, but we had the emergence of some really good young players in Tedesco, Moses Brooks, Aaron Woods, Josh Adokar, etc., etc. And they held on to Jason Taylor, probably because he'd run 9th in 2016, and he did an okay job. He did the dirty work with Farah, and that was a very divisive issue, but Farah was out of the club. But by the time he got sacked after 3 rounds, and I think the club sort of feared then, the reason they sacked him after 3 rounds is they realised that the young players they brought through were going to leave, and they had to do something drastic, and they brought in Ivan Cleary, and it was too late for Ivan Cleary to change their minds. Remember then, really, Tedesco and Moses, I think they sort of said, look, Cleary's a great coach, but we've made up our minds, we're out. So it's a roundabout way of me saying, I know Luai's coming, but I don't think there's a clause in his contract regarding Benji. And, the first warning sign for me, and I know I haven't been his biggest fan, but Stefano has left. So that's one already. Galvin's asked for a release. I know he's shut his mouth, and he's probably been told to shut his mouth for another year or so, but you can imagine where his mindset is at the moment. So if Benji can't change the mind of these younger players, why are we going to hold on to him?
Yeah, because it's an investment in the club is an investment in the coach, isn't it? Like, it's really important, because when that's the main guy that you're working with, you've got to have that faith in him. And you could make a really good argument to say that for Stefano, it was a vote of confidence in Craig Bellamy and Melbourne, and a vote of no confidence in Benji and our current admin, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I just look at the 2 probably closest examples, and I know the Dragons and the Bulldogs were not in as big a hole as us, but they were bottom feeders.
The Bulldogs were pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people said the Bulldogs were worse than us last year. They were the worst ranked defence, and they got flogged more than us. I know they won a couple more games, but I mean, to be fair, with that example, Serraldo was the coach last year, and I didn't see any signs that something was going to change like it did this year.
Yeah.
But look at the Dragons. They've got an experienced coach, Shane Flanagan. He settled things down with Ben Hunt. He settled everyone down there, and they've had a really, really good season. They were equal favourites with us to win the Wooden Spoon. They're currently 8th and probably going to make the finals. The Bulldogs are on the verge of the top 4. So, I mean, it comes down to Shane Richardson. That's what I think that's the main guy Tigers fans still have some faith in. Probably the last guy we have some faith in. And I would like a penny for his thoughts, because he's always going to toe the party line, at least in the public, because there's no point coming out, gassing the coach, putting the coach on fire at the moment. But I wonder deep down whether he's sort of thinking ahead. Can we afford another year, Joel, with Luai coming next year and coming last, and then getting rid of Benji, or then is even more damage done?
Yeah. Is it more damaging to do it next year? It's a really, really hard position to be in. Let me ask you this question. What do you think, having now seen almost a full season of Benji's coaching, what do you think is his strength as a coach?
I think he's been stoic the way he's been in the media, and that's not a big asset, I suppose, because you want to see things on the field. But I think he's been consistent with his messaging throughout the year. I listened to his press conference today, Joel, and he said it's non-negotiable that we never give in. But, is that just lip service? Because, we're getting beaten. We've had 34 points conceded. I think we've conceded nearly 700 points this year. And he said the training standards are great, but we're just not transferring it to the game. Surely that can't be the case. I don't know, but, I think he's done a reasonable job in terms of selections and game plans, and I know he's got a side that is undermanned, and probably the youngest side in the competition, and probably the worst side in the competition. But you're looking for progress, even if it's not wins. And these last 7 weeks, I thought after that little bump we had against the Titans and Raiders that we could maybe end the season with a few wins and at least maybe get up to 15th or 16th and 7 or 8 wins, but if you finish the season with 10 straight losses, it's not like we've been hammered by injury. We've had injuries like every other club, but Parramatta's got worse injuries, Joel, and they beat the Warriors and should have beat Penrith the other night. They got done on the bell. So I just worry that it's such a long gap, like even just looking at the teams just above us, Souths and Parramatta, they've had terrible years, but they're still looking in a better position to do more next year. And I feel for Jerome Luai, because the weight of the world's going to be on his shoulders next year. He's going to be expected to lift this club, and I just worry that he's going to end up the same way as Appy, just wondering how on earth I need some more help because I can't do it myself.
So do you think at this point that we would be better off if there was a way of extricating Benji out and putting an experienced coach in? If we're looking at the 1st of March next year, are we better placed making a hard call now and putting an experienced coach in, or are we better off towing the PR line and holding our ground and sticking with him until March 1? Where are we better off at March 1?
Well, I suppose the dilemma is Luai, and the fact that Benji was probably the main reason that Luai came over. So if you are in any way jeopardising that signing, I don't know. I suppose you could say if there's no clause in his contract, doesn't matter. He can be unhappy. He can come over, because I would certainly prefer an experienced coach in charge of this club. Because you look back, Joel, and I was thinking the other day, just tonight, and I look at some of the bad habits in some of our players, and we'll probably talk about Dewey and whatnot. But I think for the last 3 years, I know Madge was there for the first 10 games in 2022, but for 14 weeks at the back end of that year, you had Brett Camorley, who'd never coached a game before. He was an interim. He hadn't coached reserve grade. He hadn't been an assistant coach. And then you had Tim Sheens for a year, who had been out of the NRL for 10 years. And now you have Benji Marshall, who's never coached a team before. So you've had 3 years of, I don't want to be disrespectful, but coaches that have been plucked from absolutely nowhere. Like absolutely nowhere. That's 3 years of it.
Yeah.
And you wonder why some of the bad habits and standards have sort of crept into this club. And I just worry that if you let it continue another year, then your Galvins, your Samuela Fainus, your Talon De Silvas, all these guys just think, you know what? And their mates are telling them, you got to get out. There's no future in this club. So Brad Arthur's the one that springs to mind at the moment in terms of a quality coach that is proven, that is available. I know there's been rumours around, I think he's in the UK and he wants the Perth job when they come in a few years. But I'd be tempted. I'm willing to put my faith in Shane Richardson. If, like Gary said, if he thinks we should stick by Benji and we've got to surround Benji with better support, and there's no doubt he does need better assistance and better support. But I am worried that this time next year, Joel, it'll be the same situation with 3 or 4 wins at the bottom of the table, and we would potentially be another couple of younger players down, which sends us further down the spiral.
Yeah, it's a really, really hard situation. It's a situation that we shouldn't be in. It's the failing of the former admin, just crazy decisions. I mean, Benji, if you could wave a magic wand and undo it and redo it and, come back in a different spot, I'd love him to be employed by the club. But he should be in charge of, something like junior development or something like that, where you've got his energy, you've got his personality, you've got all of those things. But having him coaching the team, I just think I'm starting to think it's not working, and I'm starting to think it may not work. And sometimes you need a little bit more grey hair and a few more years, doing your apprenticeship, growing up, changing who you are as a person.
I'm trying to think of an example, Joel, I'm trying to think of an example where there's been anything like Benji that's been a success. Like you look at the coaches that sort of came in as rookies, like your Bellamy's or your Robinson, but they had been in systems, and even Serraldo, he'd been an assistant for a decade. Like trying to think of an ex-player, like I'm thinking Terry Lamb, and that was a disaster. Someone who's just, I suppose, Ricky Stewart came in fresh off playing and won a comp in his first year and turned out to be a career coach. That would be one example of someone that worked, but
yeah, so relatively young coaches coming in and being successful. It's not a great strike rate, is it? I mean, you look at guys like Dean Pay comes to mind. Wayne Pearce had 3 years out before he came back as coach. wasn't to any great success.
Brown struggled.
Nathan Brown, the list does tend to go on, doesn't it? And yeah, if you look at the guys that have done, if you look at Jack Gibson, Craig Bellamy, Wayne Bennett, they've all done apprenticeships. They've all got some grey hairs when they've taken those jobs.
Well, Craig Fitzgibbon as well. I think he did 7 or 8 years as an assistant, and correct. I know he hasn't won a comp at Cronulla, but they've been very, very consistent top 4, top 5 team the last 3 years.
Yeah, and taking into account that whoever's coaching here is coaching a roster that's not one of the best rosters in the game. So if you gave the job to Brad Arthur, as we all know, because we've done it before, when you give somebody who's experienced, a professional first grade experienced coach that's achieved some degree of success elsewhere, they have a couple of years goodwill. And probably most of the time their ability gets you a few extra wins, which takes enough of the heat off to give them 2 or 3 years to get their systems into place. Yeah. So Michael Maguire, pretty much the first 2 years wasn't touched. There was some criticism in the second year. It started to build. Third year ended up being a disaster. We went backwards each year. You know what I'm saying, yeah? But when you're a rookie, nobody's, aside from the fact that we love what Benji did as a player, there's no buffer there. He's gone in with no buffer and no experience. And now we're struggling, and people are quite rightly saying, well, maybe he can't coach.
I'd probably be less worried, Joel, if there was an identity forming in the team. If I could see every week, there's a defensive mentality forming here, but that's clearly hasn't been the case. That's got worse as the year's gone on. Senior players have dropped off. There has the one shining light has been the young guys he's brought through, but whether sometimes some of those young guys, it's just natural talent.
Yeah.
I don't want to pile on Benji, but sometimes like a Galvin, he's just naturally talented there and he's out there playing, and it's not necessarily the coaching that's got him there. So it's going to be interesting. He's maintaining a level head. I don't know how he does that, because I'd be going crazy in there after 4 wins, and I'm sure it's probably mounting on him inside, the pressure and whether he wants it. You mentioned, I think he's got 2 young kids under 5 or 6, and he's had success his whole life. He was a great player at this club, and he was, a maverick of a player and stuff. But I just wonder deep down whether he's thinking, am I up for the fight? Do I really think I can turn this around? Or is he just can't wait till the season to end? I'd like to get inside his head.
Yeah. Do I have the tools in my kit bag to be able to turn this around? And it's not a Benji pile-on, but like and I don't want to wrap Ivan Cleary, but you could see when Ivan Cleary was coaching us, our roster was not much better. It was probably might have even been worse with guys like Russell Packer and Josh Reynolds.
Mate, no, not even. I mean, they were the big name players. There was Peter Godinay. There was Watani Zalesniak, not the main one, the brother Malachi. It was a no-name team that Ivan Cleary, as much as we hate him, and rightly so, he got that team to 12 wins.
Yes.
12 wins, which is enough to make the finals more than 50% of the time.
Yeah.
So coaching, that's the thing, Joel. Like coaching, I think it's probably the biggest thing, because like I know we've really happy that Shane Richardson and the old admin is out, because the old admin made so many howlers that set this club back years. But at the moment, it's still different admin, same amount of wins. Whereas I look at clubs like Parramatta, and they've had bad admin for years, but they made a grand final. Now they're starting to come down. But, coaching can make a big difference. Look at Shane Flanagan at St George, Serraldo at Canterbury. Bennett at the Dolphins, they're an expansion franchise. Like that should be embarrassing that an expansion franchise could be so much better than us in 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Given the NRL really didn't do anything for them. There was no salary cap dispensation or special treatment for them. They built a roster from scratch, and they're now a middle of the road side. So I think it's a big decision, and I just wonder if you're delaying the inevitable by waiting another year. And if you do delay the inevitable, I'm sure we'll get some stick for this, because it sounds like we're marking his grave here and saying it's time to go. But I don't see an identity in the team, and that's the worry from me going into next year.
The press conference that you alluded to went for only 2.5 minutes. He said the defence was not good enough and we keep hurting ourselves. So there's not a lot there for the fans to sort of jump onto and invest in. Oh, you mentioned the term school teacher, Eddie, and there's plenty of school teachers around the West Tigers podcast. Not me, but you other guys. But it is like the West Tigers is like the rowdy class that needs the most amount of teaching, and we've thrown in the person that's on what do they call it? Placement. Rather than putting someone in who's
experience. The kid that comes in from uni that does a day a week with the teacher, and they might get to teach for half an hour a week, but they don't get control of the class for the whole week, or the class would be, throwing chairs out the window.
Yeah. I think it must also be hard when you've had so much natural ability to turn around and be a coach of guys that have their own different abilities, but it doesn't come quite as easily. Like it must be quite a frustrating thing. And I don't think you know if you can coach or not until you do it. I think it's one of those jobs. And, Going back to Snake, he said, we have no form or function. There's no aggression or urgency. There's been poor selections all year and poor use of the bench. Definitely injuries have added to a couple of those selections, but Alamalo had 4 tries scored down his wing today. Dewey obviously left him out there a couple of times, and that's a whole other kettle of fish. Fatape is not a first grader. Like there's a few guys there that are not helping Benji, if you know what I'm saying. And I know some of that's injury. Olam's out, Stafford Toa's out. That's definitely a factor in it all. But he keeps picking him. He keeps selecting them. And I don't know if that's necessarily because he's had to. I don't know if Benji has made the right selections sometimes.
No, well, I mean, the glaring one today was Alamalo, Joel, and I mean, he looked like a park footballer today. And he, to be fair, like you said, he had to cover half a football field in defence sometimes because Adam Dewey was so far in field. There was no connection there between those two. But, I mean, he looked like the Queen Mary turning around for that second try when Ponga kicked in behind him. And Fletcher Sharp, obviously a good young player, but, yeah, I saw someone said we made him look like an immortal, and we did. So is the cupboard that bare that there's no one to pick ahead of Alamalo? I mean, you look at that backline, it is pretty ordinary backline on paper. I know Buller's had his moments in his 2-year career and Dewey's the experienced one there, but, Alamalo, Fatape, Staines, you wouldn't think they'd get in the Newcastle side. And that's the sad thing is, Newcastle had 8 wins all year before today. I think they were running 13th or 14th. It's not like they're a top 8 side. They sort of dealt with us pretty comfortably.
Yeah, well, their halves look like the Johns boys at their very best. And that comes down to what I've got here in my notes, Football 101, and that is the Knights just ran the ball hard. They just ran with purpose. And you could see, once again, I'm a broken record. If you want to beat the West Tigers, there's 2 or 3 things that you have to do, and you'll more often than not beat this team. But that hard running with purpose, guys like Marju, the other winger, they were consistently running with lots of purpose. And when we have the ball, we just tend to lope it up and, it's all slow motion, no great amounts of energy. I don't know, is that how you felt watching it, Eddie? That seems to be the tale of the tape this year.
No, I think it was you or Gary raised that, who consistently runs the ball really hard. Back in the day, like a Marty Lang, someone who's just prepared to go hammer tongs in the defensive line, and probably don't have that style of player. I'd argue, Seyfarth does try and run the ball hard, but he often, because of his size, he gets bent backwards. Again, Steph, he had one of those games that 10 runs, 96 metres. Clemmer actually had one of his better games in terms of metrics. The numbers say, all right, 137 metres, but he's not skittling any defenders anymore. I was surprised, Fanua Pole, Gary said he might have had an injury. He only played 35 minutes with 4 runs, so he's had a quiet couple of weeks. But, yeah, there's a lot of holes to fill next year, Joel. That's the thing. Everyone's saying, it's great that Luai's coming, and yes, it is great. And hopefully he can be a change to the culture in terms of his mentality and everything. But, halves necessarily haven't been our biggest problem this year. It's small outside backs and a forward pack that's getting dominated. Is a lot of the problem.
Yeah, I saw somebody listing, a potential team for next year, and realistically, there's like 6 players. Even after you throw in Taruva and Luai, we're still about 6 players short. According to that, and I tend to agree with that. We really do need a couple of centres, a winger. And then the whole forward pack is just not up to the game for 2024 or 2025. Something else that I noticed, and it's definitely not just in this game, but if you watch our defence as compared to pretty much every other team in the comp, when the team with the ball hits our defensive line, we are stopped. We are always stopped at the point of impact. Whereas if you look at the teams that play with high energy, the really good teams, they're still moving forward when the impact occurs. So that's definitely something that I think needs to be looked at. Our defence always stopped at that point of impact, and thus the other team makes a few more metres, gets a quicker play the ball, gets the momentum, and gets us moving backwards. So that's our forward pack not being able to muscle up. That comes back to that physicality that I'm always going on about. Physicality, and I do like the point that was made about our fitness. I happen to agree with Dirty Reds. I don't think we're quite as fit, and I don't think we're quite as physically prepared. I don't think we're the right body shape necessarily to be able to match it with the high impact teams, which, pretty much every team is, aside from us. If you look at the Dragons and the Bulldogs, they pretty much bashed each other at Kogarah last night. There wasn't a huge amount of difference there between the two. Big teams, that's who you got to be, I think, in this game to be competitive.
Yeah, interesting, because, it's probably, I think they are a little bit different, the Dragons and the Bulldogs. Dragons are like a really big side across the park and physical, whereas the Bulldogs went out and recruited a lot of utility and probably have a smaller forward pack. They've got some big outside backs, but apparently they're definitely the second best defensive team in the comp, and apparently they're number one in line speed. So their mantra all year has been to just get up in defence and bash teams and get in their face, and they're probably number one in fitness, Joel, I imagine. So that's where I come back to identity. I don't see any real identity in our team. Like St George are a big, strong, powerful side. Occasionally they're going to get tired and get beaten. Canterbury got a lot of small utilities and the fitter side and a very good defensive side. Teams like the Gold Coast, even teams that are down the bottom, very, very good attacking side. A lot of pace in that side. Whereas us, I look at it and it's sort of, yes, there's a few good young players, but it's, individual young players. There's a good combination between Galvin and Samuel Afine, who's probably been the highlight structurally for me this year. But, apart from that, probably slim pickings.
So much of what we do is in slow motion. The tempo is so slow. Do you believe that? I watched the Panthers and the Eels, and the tempo of the Panthers, especially when they stepped it up, was twice the speed that we were able to do anything in. We just seem to be like a bunch of pensioners.
I don't know, Joel. Is that just coming back to these guys are getting bashed every week and they're doing their best and they don't have the talent to compete, or is it a confidence thing or a trust thing? I know defensively it's probably a trust thing because you're defending next to different people each week and you're on a different page and you're trying to keep your spot for the next week. So you're doing one thing and your mate's doing the other thing. And you look at the best sides or Canterbury, that the word is connected. They're very connected. They all buy into that system, that defensive system, and they know, even if you plug a player in, Joel, there's not a huge difference in their
we don't
best.
have that. We're the polar opposite.
Exactly. You plug a player into our side and it's like he's landed on Mars, it's so. And that, to me, it sort of comes back to coaching. And there's just as much, even if Benji stays, it just got to get. I mentioned Steve Georgalis too, just only because I know him and I saw him today. He's coaching the Parramatta women's side. This is a guy who's been an assistant to Todd Payton for 3 years. He was an interim coach at the Bulldogs when I think Dean Pay got sacked. He was an assistant at the Bulldogs for 5 or 6 years. So at the very least, that is an experienced operator who's a West Tigers guy. I'm sure being an NRL assistant, Joel, would pay more than being an NRL women's head coach.
Definitely. I think he was also an interim at the Panthers there for a while as well. So
I think so.
Got quite a lot of experience, Steve Georgalis. And an inaugural.
I saw, and I didn't want Trent Barrett because I just can't stand the guy, but I saw he's going to Brisbane, and they're probably thinking similar. Kevin Walters, even though he had a different path to Benji, he was an assistant for a long, long time. He's a rookie head coach, and they're saying, well, you need a lot more help. So they're giving him some assistants that have had NRL head coaching experience. So I think we definitely need to go down that path. Georgalis was just one that came to mind today. I'm sure there's others out there if it's going to be Benji next year. But I don't think, like you said, Farah and Hyington, club legends. I know Farah's gone already, but, Hino, maybe he could run the water and, coach the flag or something. But I don't think he should be a coach at first grade level.
No, not without serving some sort of apprenticeship or a longer apprenticeship. Just on that game, I've got, not that we're going to be blaming the referee for the result, but the amount of times that we conceded soft penalties. That soft penalties were awarded to the Knights, especially on the first tackle. And soft is the word when it comes to some of the tries. Like, I don't know, it was we all know some of the issues in regards to the refereeing and the referee that we had. It wasn't the same referee that we had against the Bulldogs, but I don't think that refereeing performance necessarily provided us with the best opportunity to have a good game of football. I guess if that makes sense.
You're trying to be very diplomatic.
Being very diplomatic.
You know you're going down a very dangerous path asking me about the refereeing, but I mean, bottom line is that referee was substandard today, and we've seen it before. You mentioned the Bulldogs game. There's been other games this year where the refereeing is substandard, but when you get a inexperienced referee, I'm sure there's just there was an example there late in the game where I think we made a break, might have been Lockie Galvin, and Kalen Ponga just sat on him when he got up to play the ball. Like, that was the most obvious 10 minutes you've ever seen. And there was also Tyson Gamble, who deserved to be sent to the sin bin because he was going at it with safe half, gave away 2 penalties in a row, and she just kept warning him. I'm like, just send him to the sin bin, because if that was the Tigers, you could bet your life they were in the sin bin. And I'm not saying it's cheating or anything, but I think it's that subconscious bias that, this is the worst team in the competition, so if they give away a penalty, they've got to go to the sin bin because, they're ill-disciplined. They're last for a reason. Whereas Newcastle today, I agree that's what frustrates me about the 6 agains. There's no scrutiny around them. They just happen.
Yeah.
They just happen, and when it's on tackle 3 and their team's 20 metres out, they're killers. Mm-hmm. For a poor defensive side like us. And I'm not sure what the penalty count was, but some of it is definitely our fault, and that is been seen this year. Like, the amount of dumb yardage penalties we gave away, there were a few of them that were just dumb. And even the commentators said, well, that's what the Tigers do. They put a bit of pressure on. But there are a couple there, like there was one with Stefano, I think, might have led to the second or first Knights try, where he dominated the tackle 5 metres out from Newcastle's line. So right on their own line, dominated the tackle, drove him into the ground, penalty. And even the commentator said, well, that's a bit harsh. He dominated that tackle.
Yeah.
And they kick it 30 metres, and, of course, we can't defend our errors. So,
that was at 6-all. That was after 16 minutes.
Yeah. Yep. But that's the problem, Joel. Once you become a side that's running last, you get these experimental referees that come into the game suddenly, and there's not a lot of scrutiny on this game. And if Newcastle win, there's probably less pressure on her job than if the West Tigers win and the Newcastle coach comes out and sprays her because Newcastle had to stay in the top 8 hunt, in front of 22,000. So, I think it's something that we clearly that would be another reason to get a Brad Arthur in for me, someone who knows the what's the word, just how to work the referees, because you see the best coaches, Joel, they work the referees in the press conference. I'm sure they're on the phone on Monday. The Des Haslers, they're probably a pain in the ass, but they know what they're doing. They're trying to get inside their heads to get decisions the week after, whereas we seem like just a very easy target.
And, not that you want to give Bill Harrigan a pat on the back, but if you look at the way that Bill Harrigan refereed a game as compared to the refereeing performance today, everything was black and white today. Everything was ruled on. Rather than allowing the game to flow or the game to happen, it was being refereed down to the nth degree, which is not good for the game.
One of the bugbears I have with refereeing in general, Joel, is I think they are overcoached. I think the best ref you mentioned there was Bill Harrigan. I hated Bill Harrigan, but he knew how to manage a game.
Yeah.
And rugby league is an imperfect game. It's not a black and white game, but he let the players decide the game.
Correct.
And the best game this year was probably Origin 3, where Ashley Klein for once decided, you know what, I'm just going to put my whistle away.
Stay out of it.
I'll blow a few obvious penalties, but I'll let the players decide it. And no one had a complaint about that style of ref. But you get this sort of game where they want to pick up, gotcha there. Frustrating.
Typically, when a coach comes to the end of their time at a club, the media jumps on. Do you think that the media is going to start jumping on the Tigers with the Fox journalists and that? I mean, Benji still has some goodwill there, and he's got some friends and that in the media. I think the fans are starting to turn a little bit, but I don't know if the media is going to jump on just yet.
No, I think he'll get this off-season relative grace in the media because, like you said, he did work at Fox and he's a savvy media operator. He was good in the media himself, and he would have mates in high places, which helps.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, it's your results that's going to table what happens. And Joel, if they're 2 from 10 next year, they'll be all over him because it is his first year, and he's been thrown a hospital pass. Really, he shouldn't be in this position. He just shouldn't be in this position.
Yeah.
It was a hospital pass. Of all things, it was they had the Serraldo plan, and then they missed out on him, so they panicked. And as so often, Joel, that the old regime, Lee and Pascoe, they thought, what can we do that can, please some people or just quell the tidal wave coming towards us? So they came up with this Benji and Sheen's plan, when in reality, if you stare at it, in the cold light of day, it was probably an absolute hospital pass or a Hail Mary. It was a Hail Mary thinking, you could replicate, you could catch fire and catch magic like they did in 2005, but lightning doesn't strike twice.
Oh dear, it's a tough go, isn't it? Being a Tigers fan, going back to how we started the pod. Like it's a joyless. There's nothing to be happy about at the moment. It's just really, really hard to maintain that enthusiasm for the club, and it appears, although we've been told, players always shake free over the off season. I mean, there's no certainty in any of that as well. That's asking us to have a bit of a leap of faith as well, Eddie, because as we're coming back to that earlier point, we're still 5 or 6 players away. Are we going to be able to shake 5 or 6 players out of the tree in November?
Well, it's got to be a pretty big tree, Joel.
Yeah.
Might be one of those trees in Fiji that Benji's sitting under in November or December and shakes out some locals we've never heard of, and we come back and we're the world's best team. But, yeah, it's tough, Joel. I mean, I feel like I've been pretty negative but I don't want to come on here because, it's hard for fans. Imagine how hard it is for players and coaches. They're the ones that have got to turn up every Monday morning, go to training, review the video. I'm sure they're copping a lot of heat online, social media, blah, blah, about the club. So, I really feel for them, right? I feel for Benji. I feel for the players. I still do think there is effort there. Sometimes it's individual effort. Sometimes it's, it fluctuates throughout the game. But I don't think they're just going out there not having a go. And even today, the amount of penalties we conceded and the amount of tackles Newcastle had in the 20, we could have conceded 60.
Yeah.
But we completed 32 out of 35. So it's not like there was nothing out there to like about the game. It's just that cumulative effect of consecutive losses and consecutive bad seasons and refereeing decisions. It's very, very frustrating.
But there was 2 teams out there. Which team looked coached?
Yeah, well, Newcastle. I think, like you said, the speech would be easy to give if you're playing against the West Tigers. If you give it to them, they will eventually, whether it be early or late, they will eventually beat themselves. And that's where I think we need some hard-nosed coaching in there. I know and Madge had a fair go, to be fair. I know Gary thinks, I tend to wind him up about Madge, but we were getting worse with Madge, and he was in his 4th year. But Brad Arthur's out there. Benji, he's got Luai next year. I just don't think it's going to be the silver bullet that people. I don't know if they think it will be, Joel, or whether they just hope it will be.
It's the only thing we've got to hope on.
Yeah.
But if you're Jerome Luai, do you want to be coached by a rookie, or do you want to be coached by a guy that's?
Yeah, but from everything I've read about Jerome, he's a pretty loyal sort of guy. Very popular with his mates at Penrith. Even though he's, he winds some people up. I think the reason he came to the club is because he said, Benji believed in me.
Yeah.
And maybe Penrith didn't believe in me to pay me the big money I deserve. So I think that's the tricky one is if, Luai said, give me an experienced coach tomorrow, I'd probably say, Benji, thanks, but it's time. But I think Benji will be here next year, and I really hope he turns it around. There'd be no better story, but I just think it's reaching that sad, inevitable conclusion, whether at the end of this year or the end of next year.
Yeah. It's hard to watch. It's sad to watch our club go through this month after month, year after year. It's really, really frustrating. Shall we leave it there, Eddie, and try and harness some energy and some enthusiasm for a midweek pod with some of the blow-ins?
Well, we get a few days respite, Joel. We're on Sunday night. We're on a few hours after the game. So I said I've been negative, but maybe I've been quite restrained. Given, please take it that this is only a couple of hours after the game, and you know how crazy I am during the game,
exactly,
with emotion and anger. So yeah, we will do a midweek pod. We play Souths on Campbelltown on Saturday night. That will be one for the diehards, Joel. Saturday night at Campbelltown.
Yeah. Alrighty, thank you, Eddie. Take it easy.
See you, Joel.